What if one chance encounter could change the life of a child forever and expose a hidden reality no one dared to confront? Join us as we follow Keanu Reeves on an unplanned journey through the streets of Beirut, where a single moment of compassion uncovers a dangerous secret and sparks a mission that will leave you speechless. Stay with us. You won't believe how this story unfolds. Before we dive into this gripping story, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more powerful stories that will inspire and move you long after the credits roll. Beirut hummed with life as the late afternoon sun bathed its streets in warm light. Narrow alleys buzzed with activity, where old-world charm intertwined with modernity. Vendors lined the sidewalks, their voices rising above the rhythmic honks of traffic, selling everything from fresh produce to handmade jewelry. Nearby, the smell of roasted coffee mingled with the salty breeze rolling in from the Mediterranean. The city was alive, a place of contrasts, resilience, and unspoken stories hidden in plain sight. Keanu Reeves sat behind the wheel of his black Porsche 911, an understated vehicle in a city where even the extraordinary could feel commonplace. He had come to Beirut for reasons he preferred to keep private, part work, part escape. The chaos of celebrity life was distant here, or at least muted. In Beirut he could breathe, blending into the background while still soaking in its energy. Keanu drove slowly, his eyes taking in the sights. This was his third day in the city, and every corner held something new. He had no real destination, only a desire to explore. The Porsche's quiet engine seemed to echo his mood, calm, observant, and searching for something he couldn't quite name. The streets were a kaleidoscope of life. Children ran through tight alleys, their laughter ringing out. Women haggled with vendors, their words sharp and musical. An old man, seated on a plastic stool, strummed a lute with an effortless grace, his eyes closed, as though he played only for himself. For Keanu, the city offered a fleeting freedom, a rare chance to watch life without being watched. The intersection ahead was packed with cars waiting impatiently for the light to change. Keanu tapped the brakes, easing to a stop. That was when he noticed it. Or rather, him. A boy stood near the curb, his small frame almost lost in the commotion. He wore a shirt and pants too large for him, their faded fabric clinging to his thin frame. In his hands he held a rusted tin cup. A faint rattle escaped the cup as he shifted his weight from one foot to the other, the sound barely audible above the street noise. He wasn't moving, wasn't approaching anyone. He just stood there, watching the traffic. Keanu's eyes lingered on the boy. Something about him was striking, though not in the way of the city's vibrant colors or lively chatter. The boy wasn't pleading or waving the cup in anyone's face. He wasn't trying to evoke pity. He stood still, quiet, with a focus that seemed almost unnatural for a child his age. The honk of a horn snapped Keanu's attention back to the road. The light had turned green. He pressed the accelerator, moving forward, but his thoughts stayed behind. What was the boy doing there, standing so still amidst the chaos? Why wasn't anyone paying attention to him? Keanu drove to the next intersection and turned down a quieter street, parking the Porsche near a row of shops. He sat there for a moment, staring at his hands on the wheel. Then, without really thinking about it, he got out, adjusted his baseball cap, and walked back toward the intersection. The city's energy pressed around him as he navigated the bustling street. Vendors called out to him, children ran past, and the scents of cooking meat and fresh bread wafted through the air. But Keanu only had one focus, the boy. As he neared the curb where he'd seen him, his heart quickened, not with fear or excitement, but with curiosity. The boy was still there, standing in the same spot. Up close, Keanu noticed more details. The boy's hair was messy, sticking up in places as though it hadn't been combed in days. His shoes were too small, the soles worn thin, but his face was calm, and his eyes seemed far older than the rest of him. Keanu stopped a few feet away, crouching slightly to bring himself closer to the boy's height. "Hey," he said, keeping his voice gentle. The boy looked up, his dark eyes meeting Keanu's. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Do you need help?" Keanu asked, his tone quiet but firm. The boy blinked, his lips parting slightly as if to speak, but no words came. He glanced over his shoulder, just a flicker of movement, but it was enough for Keanu to notice. He followed the boy's gaze and saw a man standing by a vendor's cart, leaning casually against it. The man's eyes were sharp, fixed on the boy. Keanu straightened, his mind racing. He turned back to the boy and spoke again, this time with more urgency. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe. I just want to help." The boy hesitated, then gave a small nod. Keanu smiled and gestured toward the nearby shops. "Come on, let's get out of the street." The boy followed, his steps cautious but steady. As they walked, Keanu glanced over his shoulder. The man by the cart was still watching them, his posture unchanged. Keanu turned back to the boy. Whatever was going on, this was just the beginning. Keanu Reeves guided Tariq to a quiet corner of the cafe, away from prying eyes. The boy's earlier apprehension seemed to have lessened, but his eyes still darted around, as if expecting danger to appear at any moment. "Tariq," Keanu began gently, "I want to help you, but I need to understand what's going on. Can you tell me about yourself?" Tariq hesitated, his fingers tracing the rim of the tin cup he still held. After a moment he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I came here with my uncle from Syria," he said. "My parents, they didn't survive the war." Keanu listened intently, nodding to encourage him to continue. "My uncle said we'd find a better life here," Tariq continued, "but when we arrived, he took my papers and made me beg on the streets. If I don't bring back enough money, he gets angry." Keanu felt a surge of anger on Tariq's behalf but kept his expression calm. He had heard of such situations before, children exploited by those who should protect them. "Is your uncle the man who was watching you earlier?" Keanu asked. Tariq nodded, his eyes downcast. "Yes, he always watches to make sure I don't talk to anyone." Keanu took a deep breath, considering the best course of action. He couldn't, in good conscience, leave Tariq to such a fate. "Tariq," he said softly, "would you like to get away from your uncle, to be safe and have a chance at a better life?" The boy looked up, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time. "Yes," he whispered. Keanu smiled reassuringly. "All right, we'll figure this out together, but we have to be careful. Your uncle can't know what we're planning." Tariq nodded, determination replacing some of his fear. Keanu knew they needed a plan. He couldn't involve the authorities directly, as corruption and bureaucracy might endanger Tariq further. Instead, he decided to reach out to a trusted friend in the city who had experience with such matters. "Stay close to me," Keanu instructed. "We're going to meet someone who can help." As they left the cafe, Keanu kept a protective arm around Tariq, scanning the crowd for any sign of the uncle. The man was nowhere to be seen, but Keanu remained vigilant. They walked through the winding streets until they reached a modest office building. Inside, Keanu was greeted by a woman with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "And Keanu," she said warmly, "it's been a while. What brings you here?" "Nada," Keanu replied. "I need your help. This is Tariq. He's in a difficult situation, and I believe you're the right person to assist." Nadia, a social worker dedicated to helping exploited children in Beirut, knelt to Tariq's level and spoke gently. "Hello Tariq, you're safe here. Can you tell me more about what's been happening?" With Keanu's reassuring presence, Tariq recounted his story once more. Nadia listened carefully, her expression serious. When he finished, she stood and addressed Keanu. "This is unfortunately not uncommon," she said. "But we can help. We have a safe place for children like Tariq, where he can stay while we work to resolve his situation." Keanu felt a sense of relief. "Thank you, Nadia. I knew I could count on you." Nadia smiled. "We'll take good care of him. And Keanu, your involvement doesn't have to end here. There are many children in Beirut facing similar challenges. With your resources and platform, you could make a significant difference." Keanu considered her words, realizing that meeting Tariq might be the beginning of a larger journey. "I want to help," he said firmly. "Tell me what I can do." As Nadia led Tariq to the safe house, Keanu felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had come to Beirut seeking a break from his hectic life, but he had found something far more meaningful, a chance to make a real impact. Over the following days, Keanu worked closely with Nadia and her organization. He met other children who had been rescued from exploitation, heard their stories, and learned about the systemic issues contributing to their plight. Through his efforts, Keanu was able to provide financial support, raise awareness, and use his influence to advocate for policy changes aimed at protecting vulnerable children in Lebanon. Tariq, meanwhile, began to thrive in his new environment. With access to education, counseling, and a supportive community, he started to heal from his past traumas and look forward to a brighter future. After ensuring Tariq was safely settled at Nadia's safe house, Keanu decided to return to the streets. The man who had been watching Tariq couldn't just vanish into the city. Keanu slipped into the driver's seat of his Porsche, his baseball cap low over his face. He knew the area the man had disappeared into earlier, and something told him that following the trail could lead to answers. Keanu drove cautiously through the narrow streets, his eyes scanning every corner. The market district was alive with activity, but soon the energy faded as he moved deeper into an older, neglected part of the city. The buildings here were rundown, their windows boarded up. Fewer people roamed the streets, and those who did avoided eye contact. Then he saw him. The man from earlier was standing at the entrance of an abandoned warehouse. He was speaking to another man who handed him a wad of cash before disappearing inside. Keanu parked the Porsche a block away and decided to proceed on foot. His heart beat steadily as he approached the warehouse, his steps quiet on the uneven pavement. From a shadowed alley across the street, Keanu watched the man enter the building. The door remained ajar for a moment, long enough for Keanu to see a group of children sitting on the floor, their faces tired and expressionless. He clenched his fists, anger rising as he realized the scale of the exploitation. This wasn't just about Tariq, it was a network. Keanu knew he needed more than his own word to expose what he had seen. He retrieved a small, high-resolution camera from his car, part of his personal travel gear, and positioned himself to capture photos and videos of the warehouse. He documented everything, the faces of the adults entering and exiting, the children inside, and the man from the market directing it all. As Keanu filmed, he noticed a van pulling up to the warehouse. Two men stepped out, pulling a child from the back seat. The boy looked terrified, his eyes darting in every direction. Keanu's grip on the camera tightened, but he forced himself to stay hidden. He couldn't act yet. He needed a plan. The next morning, Keanu met with Nadia at her office. He showed her the footage he had taken, her expression hardening as she watched. "This is worse than I imagined," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "We can't do this alone. The authorities here are slow to act, and corruption runs deep." "I know," Keanu replied. "That's why we need someone who can expose this publicly, someone they can't ignore." Nadia nodded thoughtfully. "There's someone who might help. A journalist, Leila Husseini. She's fearless, but she's also cautious. You'll need to convince her." Later that day, Keanu met Leila at a small cafe. She was in her early 30s, with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She listened intently as Keanu and Nadia explained the situation, her fingers tapping against her notebook. "This is dangerous," Leila said finally. "If these people know you're watching them, they won't hesitate to strike back." Keanu leaned forward. "I'm not asking you to put yourself in danger, I just need your platform. If we can get the story out, we can pressure the authorities to act." Leila studied him for a moment before nodding. "All right, but I'll need access to everything, your footage, your sources, and a way to stay safe while reporting." With Leila on board, the team began to expand. Nadia reached out to an NGO worker named Samir, a man who had dedicated his life to helping children escape dangerous situations. Samir had a network of contacts in the city and knew how to navigate its underground world. "Exposing them is one thing," Samir said during their first meeting, "but we also need a plan to get those kids out. If we act too soon, they'll move them and we'll lose them forever." The group worked tirelessly, mapping out every detail of their plan. Keanu's footage became the backbone of their case, while Leila prepared a hard-hitting article that would bring international attention to the exploitation ring. Samir coordinated with his network to secure safe locations for the children once rescued. Just as the plan seemed ready, the team discovered a major obstacle. The man Keanu had been following wasn't the leader, he was only one piece of a larger operation. The true mastermind was someone with connections to powerful figures in the city who would stop at nothing to protect his empire. Leila's article was almost ready to publish when she received a threat, a warning to stop her investigation. Her car was vandalized, and an anonymous note was left at her apartment. "Stay out of this, or you'll regret it." Fear rippled through the group, but Keanu's determination only grew. "We can't back down now," he said. "They're scared because they know we're close. We have to finish this." The team finalized their plan. Leila's article would go live the same night the rescue mission was set to take place. Samir's network had arranged for transportation and temporary housing for the children. Everything seemed in place. But as Keanu and Samir scouted the warehouse one last time, they noticed something troubling. The warehouse was empty. The children were gone. Keanu's phone buzzed. It was Layla. "They've moved 'em," she said, her voice urgent. "I think they know we're coming." Keanu's jaw tightened as he looked at Samir. "We're not giving up," he said. "We'll find them." The mission wasn't over. It had just become more dangerous. The stakes were higher than ever, and failure wasn't an option. The tension in the room was palpable as the team gathered at Nadia's safe house to finalize their rescue plan. Keanu sat at the head of the table, his calm presence masking the urgency burning beneath the surface. Layla spread out a map of the city on the table, marking key locations they had uncovered during their investigation. Samir tapped his fingers on the table, his face tight with concern. "This isn't just about rescuing Tariq," Keanu began, his voice steady. "It's about saving every child trapped in this network." Nadia nodded. "We know the children have been moved to another location, likely a temporary holding site. If we act quickly, we can intercept them before they disappear again." Layla leaned forward. "We've tracked some of the vans to an old industrial complex on the outskirts of the city. It's heavily guarded, but it looks like their main hub." Samir added, "The place has limited entry points. If we can secure those and alert the authorities at the right time, we can trap them inside." The group worked late into the night, crafting a plan that balanced precision with speed. Samir's NGO contacts arranged safe houses for the children, while Layla prepared to release her article alongside live updates to draw global attention. Despite the team's determination, challenges began to arise. When Samir contacted local authorities to coordinate the raid, he was met with hesitation. A senior officer, known for his ties to the city's elite, dismissed the operation as unfounded. It was clear that someone within the police force was protecting the exploitation ring. "We can't rely on them," Nadia said, frustration evident in her voice. "If they tip off the wrong people, the children will be gone before we get there." Keanu frowned. "Then we'll have to do this ourselves. But we can't cut the authorities out completely. We'll need someone we can trust." After much deliberation, they found an ally in a junior officer, Karim, who had a reputation for standing against corruption. He agreed to help but warned the team to be cautious. "If anyone finds out I'm involved, I'll lose my job, or worse," Karim said. As the team prepared for the mission, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The ring's leader, a man known only as the Broker, had remained in the shadows throughout their investigation. His ability to anticipate their moves suggested he had someone feeding him information. The night of the rescue arrived. The team moved in silence, coordinating over secure radios as they approached the industrial complex. Samir and Karim led a small group to block the main entrance, while Keanu and Nadia took a secondary route to locate the children. Inside the complex, the air was thick with tension. The dimly lit corridors echoed with muffled voices, and the faint hum of machinery masked their footsteps. Keanu spotted a large room where the children were being held. As Nadia began unlocking the door, a sharp voice rang out behind them. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Keanu turned to see one of the team members, a man named Faisal, pointing a gun at them. His betrayal was a shock, but the cold determination in his eyes made it clear this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. "You've been working for them all along," Keanu said, his voice low and controlled. Faisal smirked. "You're too late. The Broker knew you were coming." Keanu's mind raced. He needed to stall Faisal long enough for the others to act. "What do they have on you?" he asked, his tone steady. "Money? Fear? It's not too late to walk away." Faisal hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. Before he could respond, Samir's voice crackled over the radio. "The guards are moving. We need to secure the exits, now." Keanu used the distraction to disarm Faisal, a swift, practiced motion sending the gun clattering to the floor. Nadia locked the door behind them, securing the children as chaos erupted outside. As they led the children toward the escape route, the Broker's men began closing in. The team's careful plans unraveled as the enemy adapted, using their knowledge of the complex to block key exits. Keanu improvised, guiding the group through a series of maintenance tunnels. Harry managed to call in reinforcements, but their arrival was delayed. Keanu and the team had to hold their ground, using every resource at their disposal to protect the children. The suspense was palpable as the enemy's footsteps grew louder, their shouts echoing through the tunnels. Just as they reached the final exit, a figure stepped into their path. It was the broker himself, his face obscured by the shadows. He carried an air of confidence, as if he had already won. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble," he said, his voice calm. "But this ends here." Keanu stood his ground, his eyes fixed on the man. "Not today," he replied. The broker's men raised their weapons, but the sound of sirens outside froze everyone in place. Karim's reinforcements had arrived, and the warehouse was surrounded. The broker's expression darkened. "You think you've won, but this is far from over." Keanu took a step closer, his voice low but firm. "You're done. Surrender now, or you'll regret it." The standoff stretched for what felt like hours, but finally the broker signaled for his men to lower their weapons. "This isn't over," he hissed, as he was led away by Karim and his team. With the broker and his men in custody, the operation turned to the children. Nadia and Samir worked tirelessly to reassure them, guiding them toward waiting vehicles that would take them to safe locations. As the children were loaded into the vans, Layla approached Keanu. "This is going to make waves," she said, holding up her phone. "The story's live, and it's already spreading. People are going to demand answers." Keanu nodded. "Good. They need to know." As dawn broke over the city, the team gathered one last time. The mission had been a success, but there was still work to be done. Keanu looked around at the group, Naia, Samir, Karim, and Layla, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. "We did something good tonight," he said. "But this is just the beginning." The morning after the rescue, Beirut awoke to headlines that gripped the city and quickly spread across the globe. Layla's article, accompanied by video footage and interviews with Nadia and Samir, painted a vivid picture of the exploitation ring that had preyed on vulnerable children. News outlets from every corner of the world picked up the story, bringing a surge of attention to the issue. Leela sat at her desk, her phone buzzing incessantly with calls from international media. Her article had gone viral. Television crews crowded outside Nadia's office, seeking interviews with those involved in the daring rescue. Keanu Reeves, however, stayed out of the spotlight. "This isn't about me," he told Layla during a brief call. "Focus on the children and the incredible work your team is doing." The exposure forced local authorities to act decisively. The broker's arrest sent shockwaves through the city, unraveling a web of corruption that linked him to influential figures. Karim, the junior officer who had risked everything to help, became a symbol of integrity. His bravery inspired others within the police force to come forward with information, further dismantling the network. Layla's follow-up pieces spotlighted the systemic issues that had allowed such exploitation to flourish. Her work inspired grassroots movements, with citizens organizing to protect at-risk children. Donations flooded into Nadia's organization, allowing them to expand their reach and provide support to more families. At the center of it all was Tariq. Keanu visited him regularly. Their bond had grown unshakable, and Tariq began to see him as a mentor and protector. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden of the safe house, Keanu handed Tariq a small notebook. "This is for you," Keanu said. "Write down your thoughts, your dreams, anything you want. Your story matters, Tariq." Tariq opened the notebook, his small fingers brushing the blank pages. "Do you think I can have a real future?" he asked, his voice tentative. Keanu smiled. "I know you can. You're stronger than you realize, and you're not alone." As the days passed, Keanu found himself reflecting deeply on his time in Beirut. The city had been a temporary escape, a chance to step away from the relentless demands of fame, but it had become something far more significant, a turning point in his life. One evening, as he stood on the rooftop of his hotel, watching the sun set over the Mediterranean, Keanu thought about the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the moment he first saw Tariq, standing alone on the street, and how that single encounter had set everything in motion. "This wasn't an accident," he said aloud to himself. "I was meant to be here." Keanu knew his work wasn't done. He decided to partner with Nadia and Samir, using his platform to amplify their mission. Through donations, advocacy, and personal involvement, he committed himself to fighting child exploitation on a global scale. But his reflection wasn't just about the work, it was personal. Keanu realized that his own purpose had shifted. The life of luxury and acclaim he once pursued now felt hollow compared to the fulfillment he found in helping others. As Keanu prepared to leave Beirut, he visited Tariq one last time. The boy hugged him tightly, tears shining in his eyes. "Will I see you again?" Tariq asked. Keanu knelt to meet Tariq's gaze. "This isn't goodbye," he said. "I'll always be here for you." The Porsche hummed quietly as Keanu drove toward the airport. The city that had offered him anonymity had instead given him clarity. He left Beirut not as a visitor, but as someone forever changed. For Keanu, the experience in Beirut marked the beginning of a new chapter. He returned to his life in Hollywood, but his focus had shifted. He began leveraging his platform to advocate for vulnerable children, collaborating with international organizations, and using his influence to draw attention to underreported issues. Keanu worked closely with Nadia and Samir, helping them expand their reach beyond Beirut. With his support, their organization opened new safe houses in other parts of Lebanon, as well as neighboring countries facing similar challenges. He also funded scholarships for children rescued from exploitation, ensuring they had the tools to build better futures. Meanwhile, Tariq's story became a symbol of hope. His courage inspired children worldwide, proving that even in the darkest circumstances, change was possible. Keanu remained in touch with Tariq, visiting him whenever he could. Tariq, now thriving in school, began writing letters to Keanu, sharing his dreams of becoming a teacher so he could help others. If you find this story entertaining, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more powerful stories that will inspire and move you long after the credits roll.